Also wanted to talk today about critical race theory. This is not necessarily unique to Wisconsin, but conservatives all over the country are trying to ban the teaching of critical race theory. And before we dive into the specifics here, I just want to note, you guys, and this should be really obvious, but the same people who constantly cry snowflake and constantly say that, what we really need is a free exchange of ideas, right? And all this kind of nonsense. They're the people who will ban the teaching of social concepts, right? You cannot make up the extent of the rank hypocrisy on behalf of conservatives in this instance. They obviously do not want kids learning about critical race theory because what do most of these people benefit substantially from? They benefit from a society that favors the white community. Let's just call it what it is. They understand that if we teach children that our society has racism cooked into its institutions, into its social institutions, economic institutions, political and legal institutions, etc. If we explain, look, this racism is cooked into this, their perspective on the country will be very different from what conservatives want it to be, right? You see how there's this sort of natural incentive for them to oppose the teaching of this stuff. But I just find it so hilarious that the same people who will cry tone police or free speech police or this and that, they're the same people who will literally ban teaching of social concepts that they think are threats to their ideology and their worldview. How revealing. How pathetically insecure, right? I mean, you're basically taking a shot at your own ideology if you say it cannot withstand the teaching of this concept, right? So I wanted to set that aside before we dive into the specifics here. But we have an article in U.S. News. Wisconsin Assembly set to vote on critical race theory ban. Wisconsin public schools would be prohibited from teaching students and training employees about concepts such as systemic racism and implicit bias under a Republican bill up for passage in the state assembly. That did pass, by the way, you guys. This article is from a few days ago. Wisconsin public schools would be prohibited from teaching students and training employees about concepts such as systemic racism and implicit bias under a Republican bill up for passage Tuesday in the state assembly. The measure would also have to pass the state Senate before it would head to Democratic Governor Tony Evers, who almost certainly would veto it. That's the saving grace here, but I want to talk about it anyway. The bill has no Democratic co-sponsors, but they don't have the votes to stop it in the legislature. Wisconsin's proposal follows a national trend of Republican-controlled legislatures moving to thwart certain ideas they associate with critical race theory, a framework legal scholars developed in the 1970s and 80s that centers on the view that racism is systemic in the nation's institutions and serves to maintain the dominance of whites in society. Quote, this is a Republican attempt to defund education by usurping local district policies and entangling school districts as well as independent charter schools in lawsuits based solely on opinions and not facts, Democratic State Rep Lakeisha Myers of Milwaukee said before debate began. So again, it's not likely that this will pass in Wisconsin because Evers is the governor and he's a Democrat. But I've seen this happen. I think Florida had a similar bill come up. This is a trend across the country, which is why I wanted to cover it. And critical race theory, you guys, I think it's really important, right? First of all, let me take one step back. First of all, if your child is learning critical race theory, your child is a law student or a graduate student. Okay, we're not currently teaching this to like high schoolers as much as I wish we would, much to my chagrin. I think this should be part of social studies in high school. It really teaches it's a key piece of the puzzle of the history of this country, if you ask me. But I also wanted to note really quickly, I did maybe a month and a half or 2 months ago, I had Iramiose Frimpong on. He's a doctoral student at the University of Georgia. He's been on the show a couple of times. Hope to have him on the show again. He's fantastic. You can find his work at the Funky Academic channel on YouTube. He came on, and if you guys haven't seen the clip, go find that. We talked for about an hour about critical race theory. He explained it quite brilliantly. If you have any questions about what critical race theory is or are interested in learning more, go find that interview. Irami does all sorts of great content on that kind of topic matter. But it's really just teaching the relationship between race and society as it exists. Okay, he had this great metaphor in that video where he showed a chessboard like zoomed in, so you could only see maybe 9 squares or 12 squares or something, right? And he's like, the board might look one way when you're zoomed in like this. You might say, oh, black is dominating or white is dominating, or it looks like an even game, right? But as you zoom out and you add other pieces around that little zoomed in portion, the game can completely change. Well, that's kind of what critical race theory does for this analysis, right? If you're looking at things explicitly, you're only looking at part of the chessboard. And when you zoom out, the game totally changes. So I want to encourage everybody to look into critical race theory if you have not done so yet. I think it's very important for people to understand just as a social concept. If you're interested in American history and understanding how our institutions operate, you really should have at least a rudimentary understanding of critical legal theory and critical race theory. So check out Irami's work if you have not done so yet. But I think it's very revealing that like any time that you are saying, I can't beat that, I just need to ban it from being said, I think that's kind of revealing, you know? My question to conservatives would be, the entire history of education in this country has neglected to teach us about the reality of race in this country. Okay, you guys will see this later. I talked to Afeni of Fred Hampton Leftists, which we're going to show you that clip momentarily here. And I mentioned in that clip that I went to high school not all that long ago, you guys. Not all that long ago. I was not taught about the Trail of Tears. Not once. That was totally left out of the discussion. Major part of American history. Major part of how our country came to be. And yet they just leave it out. The genocide of the indigenous communities that originally lived here, right? That kind of thing. That's what I would say to the conservatives here. You have had almost 250 years of having it your way, where we leave all of this stuff out of the discussion. We censor anything to do with critical race theory, anything to do with the Trail of Tears, anything to do with slavery, or at the very least, we teach it in a very one-sided way, right? There was that famous textbook from Texas that said something about how like the slaves were better off or something like the way this is all framed in how we teach our children has long been on the side of these white nationalist conservative pricks. Okay. We have largely censored the truth in this regard. So I would say to the conservatives, you've had it your way for 200 and some odd years. If you really think you can't compete with that, if you think teaching critical race theory is just going to put your whole ideology in shambles, you're admitting that your ideology is nonsense to start with. It's incoherent to start with. It can't stand up on its own anyway. So that would be my argument there, but I do want to note that this is a concerning trend. If you get enough states that start banning this kind of stuff, that's a very, very concerning trend. To censor the teaching of reality in favor of this sort of, I think it really boils down to patriotism. I think it's that they can't acknowledge that their country is not only imperfect, but catastrophically imperfect. So they have to, ignore anything that criticizes our institutions. So to favor that over truth is a deeply, deeply concerning trend to anybody who considers themselves principled. And I wanted to make sure to note that. We'll continue to cover that story as it presents itself as well. But really disturbing stuff in many ways, right? So I have been plugging this segment with Afeni of Fred Hampton Leftists. We're going to show you that now. If you guys haven't followed their work, go follow them at Fred Hampton Left. And I have Afeni's Twitter up on the screen here, as well as her organization's information. Afeni is an activist and organizer, does political commentary as well. This was a fantastic discussion on the discrepancies between coverage based upon race when it comes to missing persons. We also talked more broadly about organizing and activism and politics as well. So a great discussion here with Afeni. Enjoy. So I am thrilled to be here today with Afeni from Fred Hampton Leftists. Afeni, thank you so much for taking the time.
Hi, super excited to be here.
So first of all, can we just get a quick plug for all the stuff you guys are working on over there? I was hoping you could talk a little bit about the General Strike Summit and what activities you guys have going on at the moment.
Yeah, please definitely keep your eye out for updates on the General Strike Summit. Follow us on Twitter at Fred Hampton Leftists if you don't already. Oh, Fred Hampton Left, I think, on Twitter. But yeah, the General Strike Summit is going to be just a conversation about what a long and sustained general strike can look like. So we're super excited, and please follow us for updates. And follow the channel on YouTube to find all the content. We're always doing content every single day. Somebody's doing something. I think tomorrow is actually going to be CJ's show at 3 p.m. Eastern. So Straight Out of Politics, please watch that. And yeah.
Sweet. Right on. Yeah, definitely encourage everybody to follow. It's a great group. You guys are putting out great stuff all the time. So a huge shout out to all of you, and make sure that you're following them if you're not. I've seen you tweet quite a bit lately about, obviously, this Gabby Petito story has gotten a whole hell of a lot of attention in the media. And you pointed out the discrepancy in coverage between missing white kids and missing black kids. And I actually have a little graphic here that I'll throw up on the screen. This, believe it or not, is courtesy of CNN, which kind of stuns me. But you can see here that 57% of missing children are white or Hispanic, 37% are black, 6% others, and only 14% of children are black kids. So it's clear, like, it's a very large portion of missing children are black, and yet the media coverage does not seem to match that. So can you talk a little bit about that and what you think might cause that?
Absolutely. I think it's because there is a devaluing of Black people in this country that has been ongoing ever since we got here. We were treated like animals, to be breeded, to be whipped and beaten, to be sold like property. So it's not surprising that being only 165 or so years removed from that there's still some underlying attitudes of our dehumanization. And I do want to say, like, I think that Gabby deserves justice, and whatever that looks like. I'm also an abolitionist, so I don't really believe in incarceration. I don't celebrate cops in any way. So, I do think that there needs to be accountability for the harm that was caused to her. But it's been happening for what now? I think 9 days straight. We've heard Gabby's name on the news for 9 days straight. And you see that same pattern with missing white women like Natalie Holloway. In 2015, they did a 10-year memorial piece on Natalie Holloway. There are many missing Black children. Relisha Rudd, for example, she's missing. She's been missing for quite some time. Nobody's looking for her. Her family's looking for her. The authorities aren't looking for her, though. The police, the resources that were put behind Gabby aren't being put behind her, though. And that's the issue. We don't, people always ask, well, why do people always have to bring up race? And it's because, like, you can see it. Like, we can see the care and consideration that's being put into this woman and to her family as well. We can see the resources that were put behind finding her. We can see, the national media attention that she's getting, that Black women do not get, that Indigenous women do not get. Indigenous women disappear in Wyoming, where they found Gabby, all the time. And nobody puts the resources forward to find them in the way that they found, in the way that they did for Gabby and found her. So that's really the biggest thing. It's really about asking for equity. It's not saying that, her life does not matter at all, or that we shouldn't be paying attention to her, that she shouldn't get attention. She should. There should be accountability in that case, but that means every person, every woman, every non-binary person, every trans woman that has went missing, we need to look for them too. We need to put resources behind them too, because their families also need closure.
100%. Yeah, it's not the coverage of it's the extent of the coverage and the comparison, right? It's not that she doesn't deserve to get some media coverage or some mention in the media. Of course she does, but we're asking for equity here and for equal treatment of everybody. And to double down on that point, there was a 2015 study that in 2015, this is according to the FBI database, 35% of missing kids in 2015 were Black. They got 7% of the media mentions, and that's just too clear and obvious, right? It's pretty obvious what's happening here. And also I'll ask you to comment on this. Gabby's own family came out and asked all of the online sleuths who've been like trying to piece things together and help find Gabby. Her parents came out and said, we'd like you to do that for other people too. So I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit to that. Like what can people do to try to address this?
I would just say put that same amount of care behind it. Like we see, at least, I'm a Black person, so I have curated my timeline to include a lot of other Black people. So I'm a part of what they call Black Twitter. On Black Twitter, like people circulate all the time. We are asking that circulation that probably passes some of our white peoples, some of these white people that follow us. I know a lot of white people follow me, and I retweet a lot of these things. Push that out, keep pushing that out the same way that they pushed out Gabby Petito's story. Push out these stories as well, because again, these people also deserve to be found. These women also deserve to be found. These children also deserve to be found. I appreciate the family coming out and saying that and not getting defensive and understanding the reason why this attention is being brought at this moment is because it's just another, just some more salt in the wound, really, for Black people. Considering that we have not gotten proper atonement. There has not been proper atonement for the actions and the harms that have been perpetuated against us in this country. And then on top of that, there is this epidemic of Black women, Black children, Black non-binary, and Black trans people disappearing. And we are trying to raise awareness about it. And the media does not pick it up. The reason why, and America is one of the most propagandized countries in the world. The reason why some people are still paying attention to this story is because the media has not moved on yet. Like, let's be real. The news cycle is fast, and the way capitalism and consumption has conditioned us all to be, if you are not actually paying attention, if you are just taking in what CNN or MSNBC or Fox News is feeding you, then your mind is already somewhere else in a couple of weeks if they want it to be. And that's just a sad reality. So we all have to be aware of these things, and we all have to build the community around these things and force the media to pay attention to these things in the same ways that they just paid attention to Gabby Petito because she was a pretty white girl. And, she was a representation of this power structure. In this country, proximity to whiteness is power. Unfortunately, that's just the case. So it's just, we want all of the same things. And I am grateful for her family for saying that as well.
Right. It's not, this is not their fault, right? We should give the caveat. This isn't about being anti-Gabby or anti-Gabby's families. This may be a very difficult question, and it may kind of just be all the above, but what do you think causes that? I mean, do you think there's just explicit racism in the newsrooms, or do you think that they're catering to the explicit racism of the country, trying to gain viewership, or like, what do you see causing that to continue this far? It's 2021. What do you see causing that to continue to be the case even now?
I mean, America is a country that was built on stolen land by stolen people. This country was founded on racism and on capitalism and on meritocracy. This country literally only created citizenship to exclude Blackness. And the ever expanding idea of whiteness is always to exclude Blackness. We have spread our anti-Blackness globally. Like, during the Vietnam War, a lot of the Black people that died, some of them were getting shot by the Viet Cong, but a lot of them were getting shot behind their backs by the people that were supposed to be on the same side as them. So This is a long-standing attitude of dehumanization in this country. So I think that, like, let's just be real. A lot of people don't see Black people, Black children as innocent. They don't see them as pure. They don't see them as worthy of being looked for, found, cared for. Because, what is it, less than 100 years ago, really, Black people were just getting hung all over the place. Like that's still this country. In the between 1930 and 1973 in North Carolina, they were forcibly sterilizing Black women so that way they could cut off our generations. They were doing that. So for the media to still have let's be real, like a fucked up view of Black people enough to not not really want to pay attention to them, that's because this country still feels that way about Black people. We can't even have an honest conversation about the history of slavery in this country. We can't even have an honest conversation about what it looks like to actually atone for those actions in this country without it becoming something that's a culture war or what about me? Like, it's not a what about me. This is not something that you can what about me or make universal, because these harms were not universal. So I just, you asked me this question and like, I understand why you asked it. But it's just, anti-Blackness is everywhere. So of course it's in the newsrooms. It's just, that's what this country is founded on.
You mentioned reparations. I think there's actually a little bit of a correlation here, just in terms of media coverage. Like that's treated like an extreme position by the mainstream press, and I don't think it's even close to an extreme position. It seems a very reasonable position to say, hey, we should probably make up for all of this horrendous harm over the entire history of this nation. We've treated these people like property. Do you see correlations there, and do you see any progress coming? I mean, do you think that we're headed in the right direction on those issues, or do you think it's just it's so deeply ingrained that we're still in this sort of limbo?
I think not enough people know about the harms to understand what reparations is even for. Like, I think that because of the way our educational system has kind of watered down the history of this country and the atrocities of this country, that we haven't even, like, we're not unpacking things that the CIA has done in our history books, and we should be. We very well should be. We are not unpacking the things that the military has done. A lot of the atrocities that the U.S. military has caused. We are not even unpacking that. So of course we're not unpacking the true and honest, like, terrible history of this country and of the brutality of against Black people. Not only Black people, though, also Indigenous people. Like, Indigenous people need their land back. Like, we're not even having that conversation. That's something that's not even being said. So like, for me as a Black person, as a Black queer woman especially, the conversation about reparations is something that's, I don't feel like is being had enough, not even in the Black community. I feel like we need to be talking about this, and we also need to be talking about the steps that it would take in order for people to understand, number one, what exactly we need reparations for. Because unless we are actually being honest about that, people are always going to fight back against it. It's always going to seem like a special privilege, when at the end of the day, and the average white person is born 3 times more wealthy than a Black person is, just for popping out. You are 3 times more valuable to this country. Through the financial sector, through the ways that like, y'all are not being massively incarcerated. Like, there are a lot of white people in jail, but that's because there are a lot of white people in this country. So it isn't disproportionate. Like, no one should be in jail. Let's be very clear about that. But there are a lot of us there. So it's just, there are so many different things to talk about when you talk about reparations. It's not only reparations for chattel slavery and for the Mid-Atlantic slave trade, but we're talking about reparations for white supremacist violence in this country. We're talking about reparations for the financial institutions in this country. We're talking about reparations for housing discrimination. We are talking about reparations for the healthcare sector. We are talking about reparations for, like, we can go down the list of environmental racism. Like, we have a lot of different things. Police brutality. We need you to run us a check and some resources for all of that. For all of that.
No, like you say, it's in almost any given category. I mean, in healthcare, Black women get by far the worst results. We could talk about housing discrimination. We could talk about generational wealth. We could talk about income discrimination, all this kind of stuff. And also, we're living in a time now where, like, again, I'll say, even in 2021, like, I'd really like to think that the people I grew up with, my generation, were a lot better about this than the previous generation. And yet still, we have states that are openly banning the teaching of critical race theory. So, how are we supposed to get to a place where people understand reparations if we literally say we were not even going to teach you, why that is necessary, right? And just to give an anecdotal version of this, I was not in high school all that long ago. I didn't learn about the Trail of Tears not once. That's a part of history that just gets totally tossed out the window, right? So yeah, I mean, so can you speak to some of that, like how we're not even attempting to get people to understand this stuff, let alone to take action that's necessary to amend the situation as best as possible?
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So, I found out that in Texas, they were like describing slavery as like indentured servitude, or like slavery as in like workers, like a profession. This was something they were choosing to do. Like, that's not how that worked. That's not how that worked. That's not how that power dynamic worked. That's not how the language barrier worked. That's not how that worked. That's not how that worked.
Yeah.
So to know that, I mean, at least when I was in high school, I felt like I was in high school all that long ago. But I was also in AP, AP history classes. But I remember like the Trail of Tears, but it was definitely like a light brush, like, oh yeah, and Andrew Jackson did this and da 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 da. Like, it was like, like it was just like, so we're gonna talk about it. We're gonna run past it though. Like, just look and run. Like, don't actually settle on it. Don't ingest anything. Don't internalize what you just saw. Just know that it happened and move on. Like, and for a really long time, like even before I was an activist and before like I'd fully decolonized my mind and I like really dove into a lot of like the unlearned history of this country. Like, I used to always say like, yo, like the things that we're seeing in Palestine, that is the same thing that happened to the Native Americans. We're just watching it in real time. Not Native Americans. I hate calling them that. Oh my gosh, that was so bad. Indigenous people. Like, we're watching that in Palestine in real time. The annexation of land, the subjugation, the genocide, the destruction of their culture. Like, we're watching it. So it's just like, I understand it to a certain extent, because like how do you know if you just don't know? Like, ignorance is bliss. And even now, like all of the disparities in the educational system, now that especially they're doing like this virtual learning, a lot of teachers aren't even being like paid well. A lot of classes aren't even being taught. Kids aren't being taught music. They're not being taught arts. They're not getting active. There are so many components of education that is missing right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I'm sorry if this is like far out, but like this is all a part of like the way they make sure that keep us like low information to make sure that we continue to keep their system going. Like they don't want us to think critically. And so if they expose the real history of this country, we would all think critically about like what this country was founded on, what changes this country has made, what changes this country has not made.
Mm-hmm.
Many of them have not been made, y'all.
Mm-hmm.
Really deeply understanding that, we would not be able to still exist as the same nation. And they are very aware of that. Even now, people are being radicalized through experience. Now people don't need theory. People don't need to read Marx to understand that like, yo, shit is fucked up, because their lives are fucked up right now.
Yeah.
But if people really like had like the educational basis that we do of like all of the atrocities of the CIA, of the US military, of, slavery, of white supremacist violence, of all of the race massacres that happened from 1919 to 1925, 58, by the way. Like, if they knew the history of all of these things, they would have no choice but to see this country for what it is. But that's why they don't teach those things. They don't want us to know those things. They don't want us to think critically. They don't want us to be empathetic or see each other as humans or try to understand each other's experiences. That doesn't help them. It doesn't help them continue their two-party, collusion fest. That doesn't help them.
Yeah.
That does not help them. We all have to stay low information. They have to make sure that we are not actually politically engaged, because knowing all these things, it makes you political. Politics is like being empathetic to the point where you want to change the system. That is political. So,
yeah. I mean, and I think, that's on the education side. I think another arm of this sort of machine is the media, right? And I would compare how they've treated Gabby to how they treated Breonna Taylor, just as one example, who also was murdered by a white person. Is there any, right? How's that coverage contrasted, right? So it seems like it's very pervasive in almost every topic that we discuss, that there's kind of this underlying tone to all of this, right? And a framing that always guides people to think that the United States and all of our institutions are doing the best they can. And you know what I mean?
Exceptional.
Yeah. So do you see independent media as something that could start to chip away at that a little bit? Like, do you think as people move online with our generation kind of telling cable news to fuck off and not reading the mainstream legacy papers and turning instead to online independent sources, do you see that as a sign for some hope for the future?
Absolutely. Motherfuckers can't afford cable. Cable is expensive.
Yeah.
like what? Of course. We're not getting our information from the silo. And then on top of that, we are experiencing these things. Like, what the thing about it is, like, the generational divide right now where people can be propagandized by the media is the fact that older people still watch CNN because they can afford to watch CNN. They can afford to watch MSNBC. They can afford to watch Bloomberg News and all of these news stations because those are on premium cable channels. They can afford that. And that's where they're getting their news from. So of course they're going to be able to be fed this endless silo of just bullshit. Of course they're going to be able to be told, these like homeowner targeted messages because a majority of older people, especially older white folks, are homeowners, regardless of whether they're, Democratic or Republican. Like, they're established, they have wealth, they have these certain things. So like the messaging is going to be, tailored to that. If a working class person that has a high school education or a GED turns on CNN, that shit is not accessible. That shit is not for you. They're not going to they're not talking to you. So like, it's so, I hate how inaccessible politics is. And what I love about independent news media is we are all regular people that talk regular. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
We are all regular people. We use regular language. We don't use these like astronomically huge words to describe, the political processes and all the procedures that are happening. And we're telling you real things with nuance, and not because we're getting paid to, because no one's paying us. This shit does not pay well. Okay.
Oh, it doesn't. No, especially with those new YouTube algorithms. Like, we're getting shafted out here. Don't anyone at home think that we're all making good money for this independent shit.
But yeah, like, I want more people to support independent media just because we need to have more democratically controlled things in this space. Like, we can no longer rely on sources that do not serve us. And the news media, as it currently stands, is a business. And so, of course, it's going to fight for business interests. Of course, it's going to fight for tax cuts for their friends and for themselves, because that's the class that they're in. So if you want class conscious news, you have to come to an independent news source. But like, I can tell y'all, I'm broke. So,
what, you mean you don't make millions of dollars from military contractors and banks? Or is that what you're saying?
Oh my, you know what? Raytheon, they just called me the other day. I had to decline their call. Like, what?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so to pivot to a slightly more positive and hopeful topic, can you talk about your organization and the community building and organizing that you do?
Absolutely. So my grassroots organization is Freedom Fighters DC. We were founded last summer. And we are a Black-led organization that does mutual aid and direct aid all around DC. We also do youth outreach as well. We're trying to expand our programs. Right now, we're in the middle of actually rewriting our message to make sure that it fits all the things that we've learned, especially as everything has changed. And we're just really committed to the theory of change, of knowing that it's going to be people power and people taking care of people that actually change the system, and not just electoralism. I say this as somebody that works for a candidate.
Right.
That shit is not going to work at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Love everybody to death. I guess we should not let people that have way too much money like continue to write legislation, I guess. But that's not where the change is going to be at. And what I really love in my grassroots organization and the community organizing that we do is that we are powering the social movement by meeting people's material needs. We are telling people, we are talking to people about abolition. We are talking to people about what it looks like to move more towards a care society and not a society that's filled with violence and with competition. And people can actually take the space to listen. They can take the space to hear because they've been cared for. Their needs have been met. Their rent has been paid. There are certain stresses are being taken off of them. But I will say, please donate to my grassroots org. We try to do everything like cost effectively, but these things do add up. We feed 200 people a week, at least. So
wow,
$5,
my gosh,
$10.
Yeah, please donate. That is fantastic. That is really important work. I had no idea you guys had grown to that site. That's fantastic stuff.
Yeah.
I'm really glad to hear that. Can you talk a little bit about, this is something I find myself talking about a lot, but it's because I think it's really important. Can you talk about how those two are actually, in my view, quite intertwined? Like, I think any candidate worth their salt will say, you guys are going to have to be the ones, like I can't single-handedly change this whole fucking system. So I need that grassroots pressure and this kind of thing. Can you, I also think that kind of community building builds trust in a way that then makes people more receptive to leftist politics. So can you just talk a little bit about how those two things really are, they're not separate, they're kind of intertwined and both can be important in their own right?
Absolutely. So what I will say about this is the only faith I have in electoral politics is if there's an inside outside strategy and the power lever is on the outside. If the power lever is not on the outside, then we have what we have right now. I have met all of the elected officials that we call the squad. Some of them still follow me on social media. For some reason, I guess they like to be talked to crazy. But I don't think they value the relationship between activists and elected officials that should be there. In Europe, in countries like France, where you have like the Yellow Vest movement, and you have like the Labour Party, you have the leftist party, you have these people that are actually willing to work with activists and put forth legislation for activists, and say like, hey, like it's either you listen to me or they go out in the streets and they start fucking shit up. I don't know what you want me to do. Like that's what they're going to do. And that's the type of relationship I feel like we need to have. And they need to stand and be okay with that, because I can tell y'all right now, like y'all are not going to lose re-election. Like you're in. Like people like you because they thought that you were going to be activists in Congress. You're in. So now it's time to actually put your money where your mouth is and put your actions where you say your principles are, because right now they're not matching up. But I feel like it's very important to build that community trust and to build that mutual bridge of not only saying like, hey, like we're going to help you write this legislation. We're going to be the grassroots pressure on the outside. We will organize the boycotts. We will organize the actions outside of the Capitol, but you have to fucking show up. You have to be there. And that's how this has to work. And go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say on that topic, I didn't know that you had met all of them. I'm curious to get your thoughts on, like, I've been very critical of the squad. I also do think there's kind of this tribalism on both sides of this, where people either deem them all to be perfect and then work backwards from that, or deem them all to be the devil and then work backwards from that. What is your take on that? I mean, do you think that they're all well-intentioned and making mistakes? Do you think there's any element of disingenuity to them, if that's even a fucking word? I might have just made that up. But do you know what I like where on the scale do you think they are relative to how we all viewed them when they first kind of came up?
I think that they are people that are comfortable, and that they are people that they do not trust. They do not trust activists. They do not trust organizers. right now they're trusting their consultants, they're trusting their staff, they're trusting each other, in the information that in that silo. And Cori Bush especially, like Cori Bush and Alex, I spent the most time, like I've seen Cori Bush the most, and I probably had the most in-depth conversations with Alex. Alex gives me like, I feel like she used to have her heart in the right place, but I really think that it's a mix of maybe trauma, maybe it's a mix of comfortability, but she's definitely not the same person that, I saw on the election trail, on the campaign trail. I mean, she's definitely not the same activist that I was donating to in 2018. I don't get that vibe from her. Love her to death. But I think she needs to just stand in her truth and stand in the fact that, shit did change her, and that no matter how badly she wanted to try to be a one-term congressperson, she didn't do that. And I feel like because she's going to continue to win, she would rather, make her experience comfortable than actually fight for the things that she said she was going to fight for. And I have a problem with that. I really do. Cori, I feel like she's an activist. I feel like she's a Black woman, a formerly incarcerated Black woman who's just really trying to, do the best that she can. I feel like sometimes she does not take the advice from people that she should be taking the advice from. I feel like, she plays it safe way too much. And that's not what the fuck we sent y'all there for. We did not send y'all there to be friends with Nancy Pelosi. We did not send y'all there to compromise with Republicans. We did not send y'all there to compromise with moderate fucking Democrats. That is not what we wanted. We do not agree with Nancy Pelosi. We don't even want to be the same fucking party as Nancy Pelosi. And if a lot of us could be, we'd probably be in a different variety of parties. If this country was actually a democratic country, we would all be in a different variety of parties. There would be probably dozens of different parties in this country. Let's be real. So, I just think that Cori's just trying to walk that line, and, it's not beneficial to our agenda. It's not beneficial to our principles. It's not beneficial to working class people, especially not Black working class people, who are still being exploited by the system. And those are the people that you said you were there to fight for, specifically, a lot. So that means that you need to put some fight and some grit behind that. People like Ayanna Pressley. Ayanna Pressley was a liberal. She's a Elizabeth Warren girl.
Well, she was a Clinton surrogate. I mean, she acted like in 2016, she claimed that Hillary was more progressive than Bernie. That was her position. Well, just okay on the you made the point about the parties. This is summed up very nicely by a Ralph Nader quote, which I love. He said he used to say to his dad growing up, "I wish there was more than two parties," and his dad would say, "I wish there was more than one." And I think that kind of sums up the partisan issue. You're right. There should be a whole myriad of parties that, we can all compete in, and that would actually apply pressures even to the parties in power. And I really love the way that the inside out approach with the power on the outside. Is that, you think, the key to this? Like, do you think there's still value in these representatives if that power is kind of shifted to the outside?
Absolutely. And, I'm probably not gonna be the most popular thing to say, but I think people need to have the courage to be uncomfortable. I can tell y'all right now, there are material needs that we need to start to build the infrastructures in order to take care of. We need to make sure that there is a mutual aid version of childcare. People are going to need that. We need to make sure that we are raising strike funds and rent funds, because people are going to need that. We need to make sure we have food. Urban gardens, start growing vegetables. People are going to need that. But it's not going to be the same as what people currently have. Like, shit is going to have to get uncomfortable first. And I think that a lot of people understand that. And that's why people back away from, actually fully investing in the movement, fully investing in, striking, fully investing in doing these things. But we are the powerful ones. Our labor powers all of this. Yep. If we all just stop, all this shit stops. And when we dispel the individual shame of poverty and realize that poverty is a policy decision, realize that Poverty is something that people are deciding to inflict on us. It's not because we don't have enough. Scarcity is bullshit. There is enough, but we all have to be willing to fight for that and represent ourselves in fighting for that, you know, and being the power level, being on the outside. I mean, when we all realize our power, we'll realize that it already is. When we realize that we can organize because it's been done before, then we can do that. And then we can start striking fear in the hearts of not only these progressives, but all of these elected officials, because these parties are working together. These parties are working together. I was talking to somebody yesterday and they were telling me they were so tired of the Democratic and the Republican Party fighting. I'm like, these motherfuckers are not fighting. They're not fighting. They're working together. They're in the back high-fiving each other like, oh yeah, good job on CNN, Chuck. You did good. Yeah. They're all buddies. They all go to Martha's Vineyard together. They're in the Hamptons together. Their grandchildren play together. Fuck do you mean? They're not fighting. They benefit from this shit regardless. If the government shuts down on Friday, guess what? All them motherfuckers are still going to get paid. Their health insurance is still going to be paid. Their security details are still going to be there. They don't experience a government shutdown, so they don't give a fuck. So it's just like, we cannot idolize these people. They are public servants. Politicians are people we put on fucking pedestals. These people are public servants. We pay them. They don't pay us. I know it feels like it, but we pay them. We pay the taxes. We give them the labor. We provide the labor. It's us. It's always been us. So like now we have to organize for us. I mean, maybe, you know, it'll be like nice patty cakes and everybody will see like the little marches in the street, but people been marching. We've been doing that. So I think it's time to try some different shit, y'all. That's all I'm saying. It's got to try some different stuff. Okay. Yeah. That's not going to work. Not going to work.
So on that note, you said we've been marching, right? Like this, I mean, going back, this latest string of protests coming out of George Floyd. I mean, that was what, a year and a half ago or something. And we did see a lot of marches for a long time and protests and things like that. And yet I didn't see literally any changes policy wise at all. So like, where's the disconnect there in your mind?
The disconnect is all of these grass top organizations that are also working for the establishment that people keep looking to for guidance. Like last summer's protest should have been a very unique and explosive political moment where we changed fucking everything because the whole world was watching. I don't know if people know about the ACT UP campaign, about the anti-war protest, but that was one of the main chants in both those protests. The whole world is watching, and they got real material changes from that. And it's the whole world was watching last summer. People were marching in different countries for Black lives in America because it is obvious. It is obvious. I come from a family of immigrants. I have a lot of friends that are also like first generation as well. They always say, and my family always says, like, the way Black people in America are treated versus like other countries, like it's bad. Like things can be bad, crime can be what it is. But the way Black people are treated in America, that shit is abhorrent. It's abhorrent. Yeah. So it's just, I don't know. It's just, we got nothing. We got nothing. And it's because organizations like Black Lives Matter, all of these other like organizations like the Urban League, the NAACP, Al Sharpton and them at the National Action Network, they were so busy telling people, calm down, don't ask for too much. We need to be realistic. Fuck that. Fuck realistic. For real. Fuck realism. Fuck pragmatic. Fuck practical. I don't want to hear those words ever again. I don't, because they didn't think it was they weren't worried about what was pragmatic, realistic, and all that other shit when they built this country in the way that they did. When the founding fathers sat their racist asses down and wrote the Constitution and wrote all these Declaration of Independence, they did not expect 20-story buildings and cars that move at fucking 100 miles per hour to be on the streets of this land. They did not see that. So we had the opportunity to imagine a better society and then materialize our imagination and we fucking wasted it. And then we elected Joe Biden. Oh my God. He was literally a Strom Thurmond Democrat, y'all.
I was actually going to say that earlier when you were talking about the parties mingling together. He literally eulogized Strom Thurmond, like literally eulogized the guy. He also said at one point that he didn't want his children growing up in a racial jungle. And at a different point, and this was as late as I think 2007 or 2008 when he was running with Obama, he said Barack Obama is and I have this quote memorized. He said Barack Obama is the first sort of mainstream African American who is articulate and bright and clean. That was Joe Biden in 2007. Okay. So like to your point, yes, it's we have this extraordinary misperception. What's that?
You ain't black if you don't vote for Joe Biden, though. Remember that.
But see, and then there's this misperception, right? Yeah. That he is somehow on the side of the black community. You remember when he chastised black activists going into his when he was president-elect, and the media sat there and defended him? I mean, it's absolutely insane. It's absolutely insane. That's actually a great thing to ask you about too. The difference between the like CNN pretending that they support Black Lives Matter or sort of outwardly saying that they support these movements and the substance behind that in the framing of the coverage. What do you see behind some of those dynamics? I don't mean CNN in particular, but you know what I mean. The mainstream press, where they very much want to outwardly make people believe that they support movements like this, but then clearly they base their coverage in nonsense and frame it in ways that actually hurts these movements.
I think that not only CNN, but even Will Smith said in GQ something about how we should have talked about defund the bad police.
Oh,
what? Like, instead of chastising activists, Black people, abolitionists, people that have been studying, working, doing this work on the ground, the Chicago Justice Lab does fantastic work, and everybody should Google them right now. Like, activists have really been studying this shit, and Black people have been living it. Working class Black people that just exist every day, we've been living it. So for people that don't even live that experience, to chastise oppressed people for having very realistic demands of survival and humanity, they want to water it down. They want to co-opt the language. They want to pretend like they're down. It's because they don't want their power to be threatened. Cultural issues, civil rights bills, that doesn't threaten their power. That doesn't threaten their power. But dismantling the police state that protects their capital, that threatens their power. Dismantling the financial power structure of this country and targeting the nucleus of their power, which is the financial and the war powers, that disrupts, that shakes up their world. Talking about wealth redistribution in a real way to pay for reparations, because a lot of Black activists are, that disrupts their power. That bothers them. So of course they're not actually going to be out here talking about abolish the police, when we absolutely fucking should, because there are plenty of countries that do not police in the same ways that we do.
Yeah.
And there are also plenty of examples within this country that show you that the safest communities don't have more police. They have more resources. They have more money. They have more programs. They have more art centers, museums, parks. That's what they have. That's what the safest communities have. But our communities have liquor store. We didn't build those. We didn't put that infrastructure in our neighborhoods on our own. That was placed there for us. In our ghettos, in our redlined ghettos. So you cannot tell me that we should not defund the police if you don't even deal with the police in the same way, because they're protecting you and your capital. You need to shut the fuck up. This is not your place to speak. I don't give a fuck if you're Black or not. If you're a Black billionaire, shut up.
Yeah.
Shut it up. Period.
Yeah.
Like, please.
No, obviously law enforcement in this country, the first law enforcement agencies were literal slave catchers. The sheriff's star that we see all around the country is born out of what slave catchers used to wear. And more just like literally in the way that they're formed. Police are there to what? To protect the property of the rich from the poor. I mean, that's very literally, that's their job description, right? It's a large portion of it.
Don't let them steal. Don't let them break shit. Don't let them loiter.
Yeah. Who's that protecting? Is that protecting the person who has nothing? Of course it's not. It's criminalizing homelessness. It's criminalizing poverty. It's absolutely. And one other thing, and this is kind of circling back, but you mentioned the things that make them very uncomfortable. How about a general strike? Would that you think make the powers that be uncomfortable?
Absolutely. I think a real general strike that isn't just a day. I think a real general strike that I think honestly maybe like a month, 2 months stretch. We're squatting in our homes because fuck y'all. And we're not working for y'all. No, we're not. We're not about to give you we're not about to give you no labor. We're not. My kids are taken care of. Like, y'all already aren't educating our kids, so I guess we're homeschooling them anyway. Like, no, we're not doing it. We're not doing it. We have learning circles. The teachers have volunteered to go ahead and to do learning circles for our children, because we're also not funding your privatization of public education either. We're not doing it. We're not doing it. Like a general strike that actually stops this system, that actually stops their money, that actually cuts off their wealth, because our labor is their wealth. Our tax dollars that's their wealth. That is the same money they use to recycle back into their military contractors, into their insider trading, back into their stocks. That's it. We are the ones keeping all of that together. We're the ones that are keeping all of that moving. We have the power to stop. I promise you, we can stop. And the more people can, I think that, especially as activists, like we want to make things realistic for people. We want to be able to show people stats and graphs. And like, if you do this, like this is the material. This is not something that we can quantify for you. This is not something that we can just tell you or show you a video on. There are plenty of successful historical things that we can point to, but who the fuck knows what this shit is actually going to look like in this society? But I can tell you that it's not going to look any better or any fucking worse than where we are right now, because right now people are dying in the richest country in the world because they don't have health care. 46% of children were food insecure before. Low-income children were food insecure before the pandemic. Before that. So we're at rock bottom. Our earth is literally crumbling. I don't know if y'all remember this because so much shit has happened, but the ocean was on fire earlier this year.
Yes.
We're already fucked. I promise you, we're already fucked.
Yeah.
We can stop. Yeah. We can stop. Then don't worry about like nothing is scarier than where we are right now. I promise you. I promise you.
Absolutely. And our labor really is everything. I mean, these corporations, they very literally have to shut down if our labor isn't there, which means their profit stops. That is their money. So if we stop providing our labor,
is not getting paid.
Yeah. That's, but I think you're right. Like, in order for this to be successful, people have to be prepared to get uncomfortable, and we need to take preparations to make sure that people can be as comfortable as possible, even though we acknowledge that they will have to be uncomfortable. I'm very hopeful that at some point we can get to a place where that is a successful movement. But it feels like capitalism so beats us down that it makes it even harder to do something like a general strike, right? Because people don't have savings. People don't what are you supposed to do, right? You're going to go buy 2 months of food. Who the fuck can afford that, right? So, I'm looking forward to the forum very much, or the summit rather, very much. And I'm hopeful that will grab some attention for this kind of movement, because I think that is, you got to hit them in the pocketbooks. That's really, we can march all we want. You got to hit them in the pocketbooks at some point. And I'm hopeful that we can get there.
We need more labor organizers. Seriously. Like, we need more labor organizers to get on board with the general strike. We need more unions to get on board with the general strike, because workers deserve better. Black people in this country deserve better. Indigenous people in this country deserve better. And we need to stop until we get better. Period.
Yeah.
Period. Yeah. Because, I mean, of course they want you to constantly worry about, I have to make it to this hourly job. I have to make it to my next hourly job so that way I can feed my kids and stuff like that. We need to start taking care of each other. And the people that have the means, or say they support, our movement, the Jimmy Dores of the world, the Hassan Pikers, go ahead and open up your pockets, bruh. Run it. Run it.
Yeah.
Because if you support this shit, make sure that you're donating to these general strike funds, because we're going to need them. The people are going to need them. We have to support each other. We're going to have to support each other. So,
yeah. Well, and lastly, can you just give one more plug here for Fred Hampton and for your organization? Where can people help out? Where can people donate? Where can people find your work and your content and all that?
So I know we have like a Ko-fi thing, so I do want to plug that for my fellow comrades. Fred Hampton Leftists does have a Ko-fi thing. Like, find it on Ko-fi. It's like I think it's like kofi.com/Fred Hampton Leftists, something like that. You can follow us on Twitter at Fred Hampton Leftists. And like the General Strike Summit, I believe, will be in November, towards the end of November. So just stay up, stay close to our. Sorry, follow us on social media for updates. That was a way better way to put that.
There you go.
Social media for updates. And we want it to be very like effective. We want more labor organizers. So if there are people that you feel like are missing from our coverage, or if there are people that you feel like we need to highlight, whether they have a high follower count or not, if there's an organizer in your fucking neighborhood that is organizing against evictions right now, point them our way. If there's an organizer right now that is helping do labor organizing for the Amazon warehouse in your district, send them our way, because those are the type of people we also want to highlight on this panel. And we just really hope that everybody learns something, and that we can finally gain that collective strength to actually like make this message spread, and get this thing rolling. Because fuck the government.
What? That's a fantastic ending. And lastly, Afeni, your organization, Freedom Fighters DC, do you guys have a Patreon or something? Where can people go to donate?
So, you know what? Just now that you just said that sounds like a really good idea, making us a Patreon, actually. But so right now, I would just follow us at Freedom Fighters DC 202. We do have a Cash App. A lot of people don't trust Cash App. So we're trying to set up some different fundraising things right now. GoFundMe stole $14,000 from us, y'all. So, yeah. So, please follow us for updates on our fundraising. We have literally basically been cut off of our funds at this point, and we've been fighting with them for months to get our money back, and they just finally told us that they're not giving it back to us because we're a hate group. Apparently. Thank you so much, white supremacists. Thank you.
I'm sorry. Feeding people is hateful. That's wow.
Yeah, they deemed us as a hate group because people reported us as a hate group. Thank you so much, white supremacists. Okay. And they took $14,000 from us. So
wow,
we are down bad, y'all. Help.
Yeah, if any of my viewers happen to have 14 grand sitting around, we'd love to make up that difference there. I have a feeling that's not the case for most of them. So
if you have 5 cents, if you have 50 cents, please donate it to Freedom Fighters DC. We will make it work. We go to the dollar store for the hygiene products. We will find a way. Okay.
There you go. Well, I encourage all of my viewers, follow Fred Hampton Leftists at Fred Hampton Left. I've had Afeni's Twitter up on the screen here throughout this interview at Red is Ari. Please make sure you're following all of them and all their work, and go donate to Afeni's organization if you can. And Afeni, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation. I hope we can do this again.
Thank you.
So I thought that was a fantastic segment. Just want to reiterate what I said at the end there. If you can support Afeni's organization, do so. If you're not following Fred Hampton Leftists, go do so. Really fantastic work that they're doing. They are on the ground a lot doing activism and also bringing political commentary and social commentary to the mix as well. Support independent media, support Fred Hampton Leftists, support Afeni, and make sure you're following all their content as well. So to